Now, before we begin this session, we have a special sharing from Shakila Rehman, student of Master of Philosophy at the University of Peshawar in Pakistan. Shakila unfortunately cannot be with us today in person because of visa processing delays. Instead, she has prepared a poem about her personal story entitled Afghan Girl and a short message for all of us. Please direct your attention to the video screens.
I hope you all doing great. My name is Shakila Rehman. I'm an Afghan refugee girl living in Pakistan. I really wanted to be a part of Yidan Prize Summit and panel discussion, but unfortunately I couldn't make it. I'm congratulating you people for conducting such an amazing event. After that, since today we are talking about resilience, so I'll be sharing my life experience. For me, resilience worked as a driving force. It pushed me to get my aims and fulfill my dreams. Life is not an easy task. You have to face a lot of difficult situation. I faced it. I mean, I'm a displaced girl. I faced criticism, social stigma, restriction, discrimination, extremism, but I never let those difficult situations affected me, my life, my educational journey. I'm doing really great in my educational journey as I'm a gold medalist. I remember when I wanted to go to school, I fought for it. I faced the criticism of society because I am from a place where girls are not allowed to go to school. So we are fighting for our very basic fundamental rights. So it's a continuous struggling journey, but still I believe that it is making me stronger. I'm more stronger than before. So it's a blessing. It's a blessing because every difficult situation is shaping you or your life and it is making you stronger. So I want to end my message with a poetic note. I'm inviting you all to watch a video, poetic video where I try to generate the story of resilient Afghan girl. I mean, she struggled a lot. She fought for her rights, for her education. She never gave up, and at last she succeeded. So I'm inviting you to watch the video. I hope you like it. And thank you so much for giving me this opportunity where I expressed myself. Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Afghana jilai, زه یو افغان جلی، زه مهاجر جلی. مسافری سخت وی، زه مسافر جلی. زه په بیدیا اوسیږم، زه د خپل کور لري. وطن خو مور وی کنه او زه د مور لري. زه په پردي وطن کې ورځې او شپې تیروم، د خپل وطن په ارمان د ژوند شیبې تیروم. وطن مې ډېر یادېږي خو ورته تللی نشم. وطنه درد دی دروند دی، زه یې زغملی نشم. یو خوا ته درد د وطن، بل خوا بې کوره ژوندون، یعنې پردي وطن کې سره د وره ژوندون. عزیز اقرب نه لري، بیخي بې وروره ژوندون. بیا زه تورسرې یمه، بلها غمونه نور دي چې می وجود نړوي، زر تکلیفونه نور دي. لالا همیش به ویل ښځه په کور ښه ښکاري او یا په ګور ښه ښکاري. ښځه سبق څه کوي؟ قرارې کور کې کېنه. ښځه مکتب څه کوي؟ ما ویل دا ونه شوه، زه به سبق ته ځمه. تیارو کې نه اوسېږم، زه به مکتب ته ځمه. زما په لاس کې کتاب یې په غیرت ګزارو، هیڅ یې لیدلی نه شو. ډېرې غوسې به یې کړې چې زه به تلم مکتب ته، ډېرې لانجې به یې کړې. ویل واده به دې کړم، د سر نه بوج غورځوم. چېرته پیغور را نه وړې، د سر نه تور غورځوم. ما ویل بوج نه یمه، ډېر استعداد لرمه، بس لږ جرأت راکړه. ای زما ګرانه لالا، ما ته همت راکړه. اجازه راکړه بابا چې ډېر سبق وایم، چې د باطل پر وړاندې زه حق ته حق وایم. مصیبتونه زغمل، ما ډېر دردونه زغمل. پیغور به هم راکړی شو هم مې تورونه زغمل، خو مجاهده مې وکړه، ځان سره واده مې وکړه چې به همت نه بایلم، همت مې ونه بایلو. ځان مې راورسو، تیارې مې څیرې کړلې، رڼا ته ورسېدم. د خپل وجود په تلاش الله ته ورسېدم. اوس خپل مقام پیژنم، هیڅ شی بس جوړ نه دی، ځمکه اسمان پیژنم. انسان ته سپک نه ګورم، ځای د انسان پیژنم. چې تل نفرت خپروي، مخ د شیطان پیژنم. چې خاپیرۍ مړې کوي، هغه دیوان پیژنم. اوس به مننه کوم، زه مننه کوم المان ته، هم انسپایر پاکستان ته، او بیا هر هغه انسان ته چې نفرت پر ضد ولاړ دي. دا د علم سوداګر د جهالت پر ضد ولاړ دي. راځئ مونږ یې ملاتړ وکړو، یو ځای شو، زورور شو، شکست به خوري دا ټول چې انسانیت پر ضد ولاړ دي.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know that Shakila is online. And one thing I know about clapping our hands is that they don't get used up as we clap. Can we please clap like we mean it? Now you see? That's good. Did you all have breakfast? Because you need the energy for the next session. Thank you so much. Dr. Charles Chen, you talked about the fact that the only predictable thing is the unpredictableness. And Alicia, you started talking to us about the 4 C's. So please brace up. I am here today with 2 amazing young people that are going to talk to us about their own lived experience of what resilience is, what they've been doing about it, and all of that. They are learners, but this is not an academic conversation. This is about their own lived experiences and their reflection on resilient learners and what that means. Anyway, as a moderator, my role is to hold space and allow them to speak. So I'm going to start with you, Arsh. What's your name? Tell us your story, introduce yourself a little bit beyond what was done, and then just talk to us about what does resilience mean for you.
Thank you so much, Angie. And I think I would first like to thank the whole Yidan Prize and all of our guests. Giving someone so young like me an opportunity to be here, is definitely going to change the course of my life. As you have seen on screen, I am a university student. I am an aspiring teacher, and I soon hope to fulfill that role and go beyond to make change not only in Hong Kong, but around the world. And I think resilience, what it means for me, is definitely beyond the dictionary definition. It's to go past a struggle in a current time of the unknown. You mentioned unpredictability. I think that's fantastic, right? I think you can only truly know if you've been resilient after the fact, right? If you're trying to predict something and get through it, you're just being well prepared. But if you have gone into a situation of the unknown, the unpredictable, and the uncontrollable, and you've come out alive, striving, different, and possibly better, I think you've shown resilience. It's not just about giving up, but it's about making the best of a situation that you may not have control over. But it's also about being together. So many times we're always told to be resilient, and that's a very individualistic approach. Now, yes, we do as individuals need to be resilient, but we have to also make this a community effort. I think that's what it means for me, Angie. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Arsh, and thank you for taking us outside of the dictionary definition.
Yes, thank you so much. And just to echo what was being said, I feel so honored to be here and to see people like this making space for the future generations of educators. My name is Dr. V. Kativhu. I am 26 years old, and I'm a young leader at the United Nations and also the founder of Empowered by V, which is a platform that gives voice to students and allows for us to make space for academic empowerment. So for me, that word resilience, when I take it away from that dictionary context, it's about, do we give our students the skills that they need to be able to thrive, and not only to thrive, but to exist loudly in education systems that have been created without them, created for them, but without them? How do we ensure that when disasters strike or challenges occur, that our students are ready and prepared, but do so in a way that is sustainable, that is equitable, and that is empowering? I think often I struggle with the term resilience because it suggests that the students need to have something within them, some kind of grit or something of that sort. And I reject that notion because I think that resilience shouldn't be a space that we sit in forever, but it should be that when we do need our students to be resilient, they're prepared for it. So I think today that's something I'd love to touch on, just how do we prepare them, but not make students feel that they always have to operate from a space of resilience and being on the edge and having to be in challenges constantly. Education should be safe, loving, peaceful, a space where you're not enduring. So that's the kind of work I like to dabble in.
Awesome, thanks so much, V. And you're beginning to bring another dimension to resilience, right? How do we make sure that it's not, I thought this thing doesn't like me. Okay, how do we make sure that this is not a place of pain? It's not a place of endurance? To your point around that, it's safe. So, V, can I just double down on that a bit? And let's talk about technology, right? This is a place where the two of you reside and flourish. You should just spend 30 minutes with them to know I belong to the museum. They know all things I don't know about technology. So, V, what has technology got to do with resilience?
Yeah, I think that we are living in a world where we have the highest number of young people we've ever had in our generation, right? And I think that a lot of young people of this day and age are digital natives. We know how to use tech. We know how to use the internet as a friend in our lives. And I think it should be working side by side with education. I think that schools and teachers and spaces like this need to invite AI and tech into that space and teach students how to better use it for good, how to navigate that. And if you're discussing resilience, I mean, we saw it with some of the laureates from last night. You can use tech in a way for good so that when disasters do strike or students do need to tap into that resilience, they're prepared for it and they have the tools and skills that they need. So for me, I think social media especially is such a powerful tool. I am online. That's where I operate. My activism, my education, it's all online, and I connect with students from all around the world. I get to hear their voices. I get to amplify it. I get to share free resources that they can circulate. We get to discuss our resilient stories on an open platform where you know you're not alone. So I think we need educators, practitioners, we need people who are in positions of power to embrace that as a tool that can help them reach more young people, because I think you need to meet them where they're at. And for me, I really value when I feel seen, heard, and listened to. And that is when I'm doing a PhD right now, and my professor has understood that a lot of the work is online, and she meets us there. So I think we need to figure out ways of bridging the gap between those who are currently missing out on education right now because of things out of their control, and using AI and tech and meeting in the middle and not disregarding it, I think.
I can't agree more with you that we also need to ensure that it's inclusive. And today we've got Shakila in the room, not in the room, but in the room, thanks to technology. Ash, anything about digital and what it has to do with resilience?
You know, for me, I think it's very different. There wasn't a time where I didn't have technology, right? I was born in 2005, so it definitely shows how young I was. But I think the greatest example would definitely be COVID. COVID started the second I entered high school. You know, high school, when you were so young, is something you kind of look forward to, right? You see all the movies, you see all the shows. For me, it wasn't like that. It was my laptop and 26 small boxes of my classmates' faces. One of them was the teacher. And I think entering such a level of education with this atmosphere definitely changed me. It gave me a perspective that said, I don't know. What do I not know? The future. You know, if I'm here looking at my screen learning, it definitely didn't feel like learning. How is this going to affect me in the future, and what will this mean for the future? Now, yes, COVID did die down, but its effects can never be ignored. I think it definitely changed the course of history. But it's not all negative. We did have technology. Now, I don't just mean we got on Zoom calls and we learned, but the way that educators, such as my teachers, used it to still feel like we are in the classroom, right? Something as simple as a breakout room, from a class of 26 to now having 4 people. You know, it felt like you were sitting in a table. It definitely pushes you forward. But I think social media also cannot be ignored, V. You've made such a great, point and persona of it. And I think for us educators, what we have to do is not only appeal to the younger generation, but really find a way to connect with them. You know, when I scroll on my social media, I can see the most wholesome post, and then suddenly it's something about war, a tragedy. And then suddenly again, I'm seeing a dog. It's very overwhelming for an educator to try to figure out how can we make an impact? How can we make someone young that has so much stuff on their screen focus and read? And I think if we can solve that issue, we can truly dial down on this fast-paced world with growing technology and really have a point of focus. I think as long as we can do that and have these young people be a part of how educators are using technology and give their thoughts and let them be actively involved. I mean, they are the experts, as Angie said. We are native with this language, so the more we're involved with it, I think the greater change can happen.
Yeah, I agree. Can I just add to that about the notion of co-creation? I think that often we hear people say, we want young people at the table. We need young people represented. But yet, we don't have young people's voices in the co-creation process. And I think when it comes to education, you need to speak to young people to understand what they want, what they need, and how they best learn. I mean, I agree with you. In the pandemic, I went in there just a girl, and I came out with 2 degrees. I did my bachelor's, and I came out with my master's. And I got to access a world-class education from my bedroom. And prior to that, there were people saying, we don't have enough spaces because maybe you can't get your visa to be in the room. Now, the room was global. I had 26 faces looking at me from across the world at Harvard learning on Zoom. So I think that we need to be more open-minded about that co-creation and what that looks like and how we can represent more voices in the room and not just... Education shouldn't be done to young people. It should be done with young people, So that's why I really appreciate being in a room like this, because it's an intergenerational dialogue.
Awesome. Are our hands heavy? Are we feeling super challenged? I love it when young people challenge us to co-create with them. Because at times, we don't know what you're talking about. It's enough being challenged and intimidated by all this technology and all these buttons and all these half bodies that you talk to. And some of the buttons you press, we're not sure where they are going.
It's okay if you don't know. You just have to ask us. We're here.
I'm an African mother. This whole asking our children business. Anyway, so Ash, I just want for you to share a little bit more on how else we can help young people to build resilience. Any best practices that you can share? We're saying we need to be asking you so you guys can tell us. I'm sure everybody in the room wants to know how can we help build that resilience for the unpredictable present and future?
I think the first thing to understand is there's no one method. I think if you go in thinking we're going to have this platform and this structure, you've already kind of failed. Every student is different. And you've heard it thousands of times, I'm sure. But it really is true. and you're never going to see the same student twice. You know, it might seem like the same problem, but what their needs are is very different. And I think growing up, I heard that quite a bit. You know, they told us, oh, figure it out on your own. You're going to make it your way. But then how can someone make it their own way if they don't know any way, if they are super lost and confused on a method to grow, right? But then, you know, this educators are going to say, hey, just keep trying, keep going. But sometimes these words only do so much, right? You don't want to have a student feel helpless. I think what needs to happen first is have the teachers, the professors, sit down with a student, right? Understand their needs. And yes, this is a lengthy process, but it's a process that will work. And it's a process that will build up over time. You teach one student, the student can teach someone else, and then it's an ongoing process. And then, you know, that goes back to my point of community. Why have just one teacher teach a class when you can have students teach a class? You know, right now I feel like I'm a student teaching a class to a bunch of professors. It's a unique experience, but I think when we're talking about resilience especially, it's to build up skills, as V said, right? My whole time in school, I always thought, all right, I'm gonna remember and learn as much as I can, but knowledge will only get you so far, especially with what we need in the world. So we have to focus on what a student can do on their own. Remember, I had a lot of students in my own class. They weren't your book smart, but maybe when you gave them a presentation, wow, their flair, their conversation skills. Now you might say, what's conversation gonna do against climate change? Well, maybe you can give them a platform to share someone else's ideas. Oh, and now we have a group of people that are motivated. It's about cultivating an individual skill in their own way and finding a way we can use that while using other people's skills to really build up on what we need. And I think the only way to do that is to, again, learn, listen, and really sit down and think about it. Not from the traditional methods, right? If you do the traditional methods, you're gonna get the traditional results. That's not what we need right now. It's been attempted for years, and I think we have to go with unconventional ways to get the unconventional results.
Well, if you're going to use traditional, thank you. If you're gonna use traditional methods, you get traditional results. Ash, you know, you said you are an aspiring educator, but, you know, I'm sitting here and thinking if I could redo my life, I'd love to have been a student in your class.
Oh, thank you.
But, you know, we don't get to put a reverse clock on that one. V, any best practices that you would like to share around how do we build these skills for resilience for learners?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in empowerment, especially as, Miss Alicia Herbert was talking about for girls too, and just understanding what are their needs and how can we best weave that within our classrooms. So like what Ash just said there, you could be book smart, but then now you're outside, you don't even know how to apply it. So I think if we're living in a world where challenges are constantly happening, constantly occurring, let's use the classroom as a way of preparing our students for going out there and using them. So use that math class to use problems that they can use day to day. And I think a lot of students, because I do some of these like informal surveys, they feel like what they're learning in the classroom, they can't even apply it outside of the classroom. And I mean, what a shame that students feel that way about our education. Education is supposed to be a toolbox that you can use and operate to become a global citizen and to voice your opinions, engage in debate, and, you know, address these problems. So if our students are not even feeling engaged in the classroom, what's going to happen when they leave our school halls, or if they can't even access our school halls? So I think for me, that resilient learning, that resilient teaching is about involving students in that process, but also empowering them to know that they have the tools and skill set to use when they need to. And I just think that sometimes I think educators, like what you're saying, they worry about veering off from the traditional tools that they know. But sometimes just because it hasn't been done doesn't mean it can't be done. You know, you can be that educator that's paving the path and using new tools and skills to make sure that when your students leave, you feel that pride of they're going to be able to apply this in the day-to-day world. We have too many crises on our hands to not take that tool giving seriously, right? Like we said, we're halfway across from the SDG goals and we're nowhere near. And we need to get young people involved in those conversations. We need to think about what do we do when our refugee students are not able to access education anymore? And oftentimes students do know some of these answers. So let's make our classrooms the playground for the world, that students are coming in and what they're learning they can apply, they can use. And not only do they have the knowledge, but they feel empowered to use the knowledge.
Awesome. Thank you. I think somebody's going to get a prize after this. They are initiating the clapping. I appreciate that. Let's make sure there's an award after this, because others find their hands so heavy. Anyway, and V, thank you so much for touching on that very critical point. I'm so glad that there are panels that will touch on resilient educators and resilient systems as well. So we hope we've doubled down on that, because that's equally critical. It's not just about the learner, it's also about the ecosystem around them and how that shows up. We're going to go now to our question and answer session from the room. Please keep them coming. Beauty of technology, everything is getting very resilient. So there is a QR code there. Please feel free to type your questions and I'll read them from here. So there is a question here for V and Ash, right? Either of you can pick it up. What was a turning point in your life that made you become who you are today as a resilient learner? What was that turning point? Was it a switch on, switch off?
For me, it was when I was 16 years old, and I'd gone up to my teacher at the time, and it took a lot of energy and confidence to go up to her. I was a top-performing student in the classroom. I'd been born and raised in Zimbabwe, had learned English, lost my father in a lower socioeconomic household, faced bullying, all of those things. And now at the age of 16, I'd found my love for education through books and learning, and I realized, oh, I'm quite smart, and I think I should, do something with this, and knowledge is power. The more I knew, the more I could advocate for myself. So I mustered up the courage to go up to her and say, I really think I want to try and go to Oxford University. And it was very unheard of for our area. We'd never had an Oxford or Cambridge student before. It just wasn't the type of thing that we did. And she just looked at me and she was like, no. It's not happening. It's not for someone like you. We're not doing that, and it's going to take a lot to prepare you. We just don't have the time. And that, for me, was almost the catalyst to everything that has happened since, because I just thought, how dare you? How dare you? I have the passion, I have the grace, I have the desire, and because you haven't seen many people like me there, you're telling me that your fears are being projected onto me, and now you're dictating what the rest of my life could possibly look like. So that for me was, that was a mistake, because then it brought that fire in me that I don't want another young person to feel the way I've just felt again, where you are doubted because of people's external fears. So I think that was the moment that I began advocating for other young people. Honestly, I think they regret it. But that was the moment for me, for sure.
Awesome. And as they say, the rest is history.
The rest certainly is.
The rest is history. And I think let me just also introduce the room to your book, because I think because she talks about her being 16 years. There's a whole book, that she wrote about that, Empowered by V. So please make time and listen to her journey and hear more about that. I think it's just incredible. Ash, what was your turning point?
I think it's quite cliche, but it's my teacher, my English teacher. I am going to be an English teacher. But I think before that, we have to understand who I was before. I wasn't always the best student. And it's something I talk about proudly. Why? Because we as educators, we need to support those who may not be the best students, right? When you have someone who's already quite successful, has the grades, you kind of know they're going to be okay in life. Sure, they need support, but they don't need as much support as someone who may be struggling. And that's when I met my English teacher. Her name is Miss Chan. And the reason I knew that she changed my life was how she gave me feedback. I was so used to the X's or the single letter words on my test papers or any assignment. But when I submitted one of my essays to her, she gave me comments, and I'm not even kidding, her comments were longer than my essay. It was really disheartening to see it. But then she gave me exactly what I needed to improve. And I was like, wow, it's not that hard. You know, getting an X can mean anything, but she literally explained it to me. It was on a Google Doc, so yes, technology, but it was right there. As long as I took that in and applied it, my work would have got better. And I did that, and it did get better. And then she kept doing that, and I kept getting better. After a while, I sort of started thinking like her. And when I would read my essay, I was like, what would Miss Chan say? And then I would change it, and then my essay got better. It got to a point where when I was doing my last year of English, I was in her class, and then students would come up to me and ask me for feedback. And I sat right beside her. And I was becoming the teacher, and that's why I really wanted to pursue my degree. But then from that turning point, I realized if you just care enough to give extra feedback, a little bit more nurturing, you're really going to change someone's life. And from an educator's perspective, it may take more time, yeah. But then the more you put in, the more you get out. And I think it's important that we don't overlook a student that, you know, has poor grades or poor behavior. You know, I always relate this point with when I was back in grade 6. We were reading a book called Holes, and we had to write an essay. One period is 84 minutes. In 84 minutes, I couldn't even write a single word on my paper. So I went from not writing a single word to writing research papers in universities. You know, not only does it show growth, but it shows the impact of how much one individual can have. And, you know, whenever I'm struggling, I think, what would Miss Chan say to me? What would she provide for me? And that's always pushed me through.
Wow. And can we also clap hands for the teacher that inspired that as well, you know? You know, at this point, I really wish we were in Africa. So for those who don't know, in Africa, we are in the business of creating time. For as long as the sun is out, there is time. Unfortunately, here, that rule doesn't apply. So you realize that the clock keeps moving, even when the sun is out. Are we going to go through a final question from the audience? Oh, there are so many beautiful questions. I wish I was co-creating with you, but there are 10 questions here, so we're going to go traditional. I'll pick again. So, what is your vision for the future of education? So, yes, unpredictable, but when you sit there, what do you see? What does that look like? And
yeah, I wish I was in Africa.
Yeah.
My vision, wow. I think having a perfect vision, a perfect world is going to be different for everyone. But I truly think, for me, it's very simple. It's to see every student getting the help they need and going into a sector they want to be in, right? Whether it's a businessman, a teacher, an author. It's them coming together as a community for a common goal, right? I think in education, we always think about the classroom, right? Whether it's, you know, a primary school classroom or a university classroom, but, you know, education happens everywhere. It happens right here. I think it's in a way where we can keep learning beyond, right? There's definitely a notion where when people, they get a degree and they get into their dream job, suddenly they're done learning. Sure, they might learn the skills they need to do that job more efficiently. But what about learning from another sector? I think having that multi-sector implementation of growth between, you know, different individuals to really make it so it's not clear what that one sector is. Because, right, you can have business, but then what if we have business and science collaborating to make something new? I think that's really my vision. We don't really want a clear line, but instead we want a huge line that encapsulates everyone. I think as long as we can keep curating that and we keep moving forward through the resilience we show, we're really going to get there.
Awesome. I love the idea of continuous improvement and curation and learning. There is no permanence and staticness in there. V, quickly. What's your vision?
My vision for the world is through the lens of education, of course, but always through the lens of girls too. That's where my heart is. And for me, I want to exist in a world where girls receive quality, equitable, and safe education, where they're not fearing gender-based violence, sexual assault. They're not going into the classroom worried that they'll be told they can no longer be in there because of their gender. I want to live in a world where period poverty doesn't affect their grades, where sudden changes in war and politics and whoever's in government means that they now lose access to funding or access to education. I want to exist in a world where girls have autonomy. They have the choice to choose their future and choose what they want to be, and they don't think because of my gender I am restricted to how far and wide I can dream. I want to live in a world where girls' voices matter, where they feel valued, because when you teach a girl, you teach a world. We know this. It's proven in the stats, it's proven in so many ways, and yet we're still fighting for girls just to get access, just to even have a seat at the table. And for me, that's unacceptable. So I think I would love to live in a world where when we include girls, we're including everybody. So if we can have that conversation on the table of how do we make sure that it's not up for debate anymore. Girls' education should not be debatable. It's a non-negotiable. It is their right to learn safely, and that's the kind of world that I want to exist in, and I'm gonna be a part of making that happen, FYI.
Awesome. Okay. Did you get the FYI? We had that. We had that. All right. Thank you so much. I am looking at this time and I'm like, you know what? I need to create my time. Anyway, so Arsh and V, thank you so, so much. Unfortunately, there are all these questions, and some people are typing their questions rather late. So I'll just say the questions out and see how you can build them in your final words. I don't mean you're dying, right? It's final words on the plenary. Just keep that in mind. And we just, to double down on your point around girls' education, at CAMFED we say we support girls to learn, to thrive, and to lead. And it's not just that, you know, when you say, oh, I'm going to support girls, I love your point around the fact that when you can support the most marginalized in the system, it works for everybody. So as we talk about resilience in education, as we talk about sensitivity and all of that, we need to keep it in mind. So here are some of the questions that I had been asked that I want you to keep in mind as I ask your final question. Ash, there was a question specifically targeted for you. And this person wrote, from your living and learning experience in Hong Kong, what do you think is the role of resilience for students in Hong Kong? And then the other question that was, so in other words, does this really apply here? and then the other question was, how helpful and effective is school counseling in building resilience? What can schools do to encourage students to seek help? Another question was, if you're going to co-create materials for resilience, how would you do it? V, you spoke earlier on about we don't want this to be about a constant fight, constant exhausting, but how then would we do it? You had an educator say to you, this is not your world, please, punch within your weight. As you had a teacher see you and hear you, so how does this feature? So my actual question to you, so these are backdrop questions for you to keep in mind. My actual question to you is, this panel is about to end in a few minutes. You can see that clock, right? What is the one thing, as a resilient learner, what is that one thing that you want this room and beyond to never forget about resilience? One thing they should never forget. Let it haunt them, let it encourage them, inspire them, but what is that one thing that you would love for them to take home?
Okay, those are very good questions. So if you definitely want answers, come up to me after. But Angie, but no, Angie, I think you asked the most important one. And it's something I was thinking about, right? I don't get this chance a lot. I'm sure a lot of you also don't get this chance a lot, to have a 19-year-old up on stage give his thoughts. And I think that's exactly what we need more of. When I talk to some of my professors and teachers, there's always this underlying tone of fear. When you take your chance on a student, whether they're in university or in high school, and you try to give them a big opportunity, it kind of reflects on you, right? You kind of chose them, so if they do well, or however well they perform, it's kind of reflected on you, your judgment, and you are kind of shown through them. And I think we have to remove that fear. And the best way I've thought about it so far is there's two sides. You have those that are professors in power, that have the resources, and that have been through education. And then you have the students, the newer generation. And they have their thoughts, their ideas. But what do they not have? Resources. And what does this side need? They need ideas. They need the first-hand experience that students are experiencing. So then what can we do? You have to come in the middle. We need those that are well-established to give the resources and take the chance. We live in a world where anything can happen at any time. Taking a small chance, a small bet on someone that has ideas, that's lived through it, can do, unpredictable things. And those unpredictable things may work out or they may not, but you never know until you try. So I think my only message is when you see a student that has potential, even a tiny bit, double down on it. Ask them for their thoughts even more. I know there's a lot of professors in this class. I'm sure you can think of a student or students or groups. Yes, I can see every professor's face light up a little bit. That's good. That means you have to send the email right after this, all right? Take the chance on the student. Because the worst thing that can happen is you learn a bit more, or the best thing that happens is you've solved a major problem in the world. And I think if we want to relate it back to resilience is, showing your support to someone that's so young, that's going to give them that power and drive they need in them. And that can only really be curated by someone they look up to. Think about it when you're a professor, your specific degree. Those students chose it because they have the same thoughts, ideas, and goals as you. So why not? Imagine they're a younger version of yourself. What would you want your professor to say to you? You'd want them to give you every chance they have, right? So take that chance. And if it works out, great. And if it doesn't, try again. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Take that chance. If it doesn't work, try again. V, you are not in Africa, my sister.
I know, I can see the time.
Thank you.
For me, I think the one key takeaway I would love everybody in the room is that student voice and perspective matters. How students experience and exist within your classroom matters. And I think that if you are an educator or you're in the education finance section or you're in any capacity helping to impact a student's experience, always asking yourself, how do I ensure that every single student in my classroom can exist loudly within this room? How do I ensure that they can bring their full selves to this learning experience so that they can really be in the experience and that they're not just enduring your classroom? Imagine a student is going home saying they are enduring your classroom. That is a shame. That is a really big shame. So how do we ensure that students within your care, within your duty of care, are existing loudly? They're able to express, they're able to take in, whether it's from the empowerment angle, resilience angle, whatever angle you want to label it as long as your students feel free, safe to express, to ideate, to be able to come and ask questions, to be able to express what they need and how they need it, to be able to take in the information that you're trying to pass on to them, then for me, I think you are just helping make that 1% better every single day. So if your student is in that room and they are engaged, they have a sense of belonging, they feel valued, they feel like they can truly immerse themselves in what you are trying to impart, the knowledge you're imparting on them, then I think we're in the clear.
I'm juxtaposing what you are saying, and I'm thinking about this most marginalized girl or boy in this rural community for whom education is the be it and the be all, and they are fighting every single day. You're thinking, if I just go one mark off, there goes my future. I know personally what it means to learn in fear, to think that if I make one mistake, then it's not just my life, it's the whole generation, it's the whole village. I'm letting some people down. So to just bring the whole point around enjoying lesson, that resilience has to be about adaptability, dexterity. It doesn't have to be about pain and fear is a critical thing. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been an awesome, phenomenal opportunity. Can we just please clap hands for the 2 finalists? Can we not forget there is also Shakila, who is not in the room, who is online, who has joined us virtually. But we pray for a time when we can all be in the same room at the same time, wherever we are, as she said, that we can continue to participate. Can you please also clap hands for her? There is no more I can add or subtract. We heard from the resilient learners themselves. Please don't forget their aspirations, their vision, the complexities that they talked about as we discuss this afternoon about educators and systems. By the end of the day, we are ultimately accountable to the primary benefactors of an education system, and they have spoken. Thank you so much, and